Well, for weeks, there's been a staring contest between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump on the issue of tariffs in trade, whether it's steel, the auto sector, or dairy. Things seem to be in hand until the G7 meeting in Quebec, where they went off the rails through a misunderstanding or a few careless comments and tweets. Oh my God, it looks terrifying. Don't take it from me from a political point of view. Take it from two different Canadian banks that have run the numbers. I have in front of me a report from TD Bank that says if this trade war actually comes to pass, 160,000 Canadian jobs would be in jeopardy. The Scotiabank says that such a trade war would shrink Canada's GDP by 1.8%. We're talking about a recession. Is this going to happen, and can we survive? These aren't just hyperbolic questions. They're real life now, I think. Joining us now via Skype to talk about this is our friend Professor Ian Lee. He's with the Sprott School of Business, an associate professor at Carleton University. Professor Lee, I'm sounding dramatic. It's not me that's dramatic. These numbers are terrifying. There's also predictions that our dollar will fall into the 60-something cent range. Tell me how bad it would be if this Trump-Trudeau trade war actually happened.
Excellent question. Good to speak with you, Ezra. There's two separate issues. The issue is how likely is it going to happen? And if it did happen, how bad will it be? I'm actually of the view that the consequences are so bad that it won't happen. You know, this is almost like the logic of mutual assured destruction back in the old days between the United States and the Soviet Union. The consequences of nuclear war were so awful to both sides. The devastation of life was so awful, it ensured it didn't happen. But in that instance, there was a rough equivalence. Both sides had enormous numbers of nuclear warheads. In this instance, my analogy falls down. And that falls down because we don't have lots and lots of nuclear warheads, to continue my metaphor. What I'm trying to say is the United States is 10 times bigger. And people say, oh, 10 times, that's that big. Well, it's sort of like a person who plays peewee hockey, at the age of 5 or 6, saying, I'm going to get into a fight with an NHL professional hockey player. That's not a contest. I mean, it shouldn't even be allowed to be child abuse because the small child would just be, it would be horrible what would happen to them if they got in a fight with a huge hockey player. The numbers in these two studies are showing, that we're 1/10 the size of the United States. They also show the incredible dependence of our economy on the United States. To put this as bluntly as I can, and I know it's very politically incorrect right now, but we need the United States far, far more than the United States needs Canada. And I know it's, where there's a lot of people, pounding their chest and saying, let's stand up to that bully Donald Trump, and poke him in the eye because he's rude and all those, things. My late mother was a very, very practical person, never went to university, grew up in Depression, Saskatchewan, actually. And she used to tell me over and over and over when I was a kid, you don't cut off your nose to spite your face. Yeah. And if we get into a trade war with the United States, we are truly cutting off our nose to spite our face, and we are going to hurt ourselves. We're not going to hurt the United States.
Yeah. Well, and those are the two opposing forces. Politically, it's like catnip to politicians, especially those on the left, to demonize Trump. It's the easy thing. Hollywood's behind it. The media are generally behind it.
Yes.
So you get applause from certain quarters, so that's tempting to a politician, applause and moral support, and maybe Saturday Night Live will cheer for you. But on the other hand, that economic devastation, here's what I think is different about Trump, and you can love him or hate him, but I think, Professor, when he talks about trade wars, this is not something he's just discovered in the last year. I've seen interviews of Trump in the 80s on the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about trade barriers. So this isn't some casual thing he's trying out. He's been thinking about it for decades. And I see he just got tough with Chinese tariffs of an enormous scale. Here's my question. People who think Trump is bluffing in a poker game, that he would never do it because of, like you say, the mutually assured destruction. Trump, not only do I not think he's bluffing on Canada,
Right.
we see he's not bluffing with mighty China. And so here's my question. I'm sorry, I'm just giving you some of my thoughts, but my question is, do you think there are cooler heads in Ottawa who would say, whatever you think of Trump, this man has ice in his veins on tariffs, and if he's willing to fight China, he'll fight us too?
Ezra, I completely agree. I've been saying this for 2 years. Let me deal quickly with your first point. Trump did not just suddenly wake up one morning, and say, gee whiz, I think I'm going to start, yelling and blustering the neighbors over trade. I went back and read just after he became the candidate for the Republican Party, I read every economic speech that he had given to that point. And I've read every economic speech he's given since that it could be classified as a speech on trade and investment. This is his issue. This, I believe it's not so much immigration. I'm not suggesting immigration is not important. What I'm saying is the trade file, this sense that America has been taken advantage of by its allies and its enemies for the last 30, 40, 50 years is deep in Donald Trump's psyche. Point one. Point two, this is not all by itself in Donald Trump's head. There are large numbers of Americans. I have traveled on road trips across many states as recently as last summer to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, went to Canton, Ohio, and went to Cleveland, Ohio, went across upstate New York and upstate Pennsylvania. And we drive down every year to Hilton Head, and we've spoken to people in rural South Carolina, rural North Carolina. If you get outside the big cities, the San Franciscos, the Chicagos, the New Yorks, where the very well-educated and high-income, wealthy and upper-middle class and elites live, they're doing fine. But you get out to the small towns, the rural, the semi-rural, the burbs, the exurbs, and it's a completely different America. And he resonates because they feel that they have been exploited, that they have been taken advantage of. And so Trump is absolutely sincere and real on this, whether we hate him or not. Whether we like him or not, he is absolutely authentic. He is going to deliver on this because he is convinced this is going to he's going to retain control of the Congress, of the U.S. House this fall, and ensure his reelection in 2020. So yes, he has ice in his veins. The second part of your question, very quickly, Ezra, are there people in the Ottawa bubble, and I'm obviously being a bit, sarcastic when I say that, are there people in the Ottawa bubble who understand that? I'm not sure, and I've lived here all my life. But, there's such a contempt towards and dislike towards Trump that I think it has clouded the thinking of people, many people in Ottawa. Some say, we'll stand up to the bully, not having any sense that we don't have the capacity to stand up to an economy that's 10 times larger. Then there's others who don't think that Trump is going to do it, that he's just bluffing. And so we've backed ourselves into a corner. I believe that Mr. Trudeau went into the NAFTA negotiations and Ms. Freeland making a huge strategic mistake. They went in saying, we're going to protect those 6 or 7 or 8 protected industries. We're going to defend them to the death. Instead of going in and saying, we must have access for all 36 million Canadians to the totality of the American economy without tariffs and with the dispute mechanism. And to achieve that end, everything is on the table. Telecom, Canadian telecom, dairy, supply management, banking, airlines, etc. Instead, they didn't. They went in and said, we're going to stand up to the bully and we're going to keep protecting our protected industries. I think that this was an enormous strategic mistake.
Yeah. And there are all those strange obsessions with gender analysis and global warming, things that, I'm against them substantively, but even from a process point of view, put them in another treaty, not a trade treaty. You want to talk about gender? Yes. What's that doing in a NAFTA? Let me ask you, here's what scares me. Detroit, Michigan, Ohio, these places you mentioned, they're hurting. They were called the Rust Belt for so long, as in it used to be the Steel Belt, but it got worn out and obsolete. Trump has said, I'm bringing the factories back. He was focused with Mexico, but now we're on his radar screen, and that's bad, I think. I understand that Canada exports many more cars to the States than we import. If Ontario hates Trump, and I don't think all Ontarians do, but the leadership does, What does Trump care? He doesn't have any votes in Ontario. If he moves some of those big three factories from Windsor, from Oakville, back into Detroit and Ohio, he'll have a lock on those states forever. And yeah, people in Ontario and Quebec will be very upset with that, but they don't vote in the Electoral College. I am truly worried. I don't think we were on his radar. I think he was focused on China and Mexico, and we just sort of flicked his nose once too many times. What do you think the likelihood is that Trump is saying, the heck with it, if I bring 1 million or even 500,000 more car production a year to Ohio, Michigan, people will say he did it. Trump did it. He brought industry back, and he'll be assured of a re-election. I think that's so tempting. Trudeau doesn't have anything to offer that's more tempting.
I agree, and that's my real fear. I have said over and over, Trump doesn't care what the voters of Mexico or Canada or Germany or France or UK or anywhere else they say or think. They're not going to vote for him. He knows that. He knows that he was elected by the thinnest of margins in 3 states that put him there. I'm referring to Michigan. I'm referring to Ohio. I'm referring to Pennsylvania. And I have driven through those states. I mean, as recently as only 2 months ago. And there is, again, it's not, I don't think Canadians really have this full accurate sense of what's going on. He is popular in these blue collar neighborhoods and communities, Scranton, Pennsylvania, for example, where, they are not as prosperous. I mean, it's obvious with the eye. You don't have to look at statistics. You can see it, just in the housing and the cars and so forth. And they like him. They respect him because they think he is standing up for them. And this is what people in Canada don't realize. And that's why, again, I said I think that Mr. Trudeau has made a serious mistake with Ms. Freeland in negotiating. Instead of saying, what can we offer up in order to assure as much as possible guaranteed access to the entire U.S. market of $20 trillion. Instead, we got so focused on defending 9,000 dairy farmers and several thousand workers in the telecom industry that he's lost sight of the grand prize, which is that our economy is completely dependent on the U.S. and we must have access to the entire U.S. economy. And we risk losing that because of our, I think, intransigence in negotiating at NAFTA.
Yeah. I tell you, I wish there was some elder statesman, even if it was from a different party. I know, I just sense in my bones that Brian Mulroney would help if asked. I think that even Jean Chrétien, I mean, he's a proud Canadian and he's poked the U.S. in his day. I think Chrétien's a deal maker by nature. I actually think he could even help, and I'm not a super fan of his. I think even Stephen Harper, in his own way, is trying to smooth things over. I put this out on Twitter the other day. Conrad Black, a former personal friend of Trump who did business with him in Chicago. There are elder statesman type characters who don't have the Trump derangement syndrome in them and who understand what's at stake. I just don't know if there's anyone in Trudeau's circle that could let go of the steering wheel and let a grown-up take over. Last word to you, Professor. Listen, I'm a critic of Trudeau's for partisan reasons, but God forbid we lose Canada's auto industry. It ain't never coming back. And we've already lost so much of our oil and gas industry. Is there a way that some elder statesman, even if he's from another party, even if it's Frank McKenna, who I think did a good job as an ambassador down there, is there someone that can maybe help straighten things out?
I do believe there is. And again, it goes back to a mistake. I'm not a partisan. I don't belong to any political party. I do not donate money to any political party. But I think that Mr. Trudeau, when he did after he became the leader, as we all know, he famously threw out the elders in the Liberal Party. Many of them were blue liberals, which is the word we give for business liberals, whom I do respect. I include Frank McKenna in that. I include Jean Charest, who I have enormous respect for. Robert Bourassa, the late Robert Bourassa.
John Manley, maybe.
John Manley. Yeah. I'm hoping that a group of senior elder liberal, as Jean Chrétien, approach Mr. Trudeau very privately, quietly, and say, look, Mr. Trudeau, you've had 24 months to try out that progressive agenda of yours. and it has failed miserably. And we're at risk. We're risking the entire economy of Canada. And they could provide, call it a backroom kitchen cabinet to him for this crisis, and then give him the advice that he's clearly not receiving from his aides in the PMO or his cabinet ministers.
Well, I tell you, for the sake of so much of our industrial economy, I hope we get it back on track. Professor, you've been very generous with your time. Thanks so much for your point of view. And God willing, one of those elder statesmen in the Liberal Party, at least, will be able to get through to Trudeau and pull him off his collision course. Thanks for your time today, Professor.
My pleasure, Ezra. Thanks very much.
All right, there you have it. Professor Ian Lee, he's with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. That's an excerpt from my daily TV show, The Ezra Levant Show. Normally it's behind a paywall, but I thought you'd like this video, so we put it on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to watch the daily show every day, including always 2 interviews a day, and I read my hate mail, just click on this screen and become a premium member.